Part 2. Meanwhile, Kasim's wife had grown very uneasy at her husband's prolonged absence, and at nightfall, unable to endure further suspense, she ran to Ali Baba, and telling him of his brother's secret expedition, entreated him to go out instantly in search of him. Ali Baba had too kind a heart to refuse or delay comfort to her affliction. Taking with him his 3 asses, he set out immediately for the forest, and as the road was familiar to him, he had soon found his way to the door of the cave. When he saw there the traces of blood, he became filled with misgiving. But no sooner had he entered than his worst fears were realized. Nevertheless, brotherly piety gave him courage. Gathering together the severed remains and wrapping them about with all possible decency, he laid them upon one of the asses. Then, bethinking him that he deserved some payment for his pains, he loaded the 2 remaining asses with sacks of gold, and covering them with wood as on the first occasion, made his way back to the town while it was yet early. Leaving his wife to dispose of the treasure borne by the 2 asses, he led the 3rd to his sister-in-law's house, and knocking quietly so that none of the neighbors might hear, was presently admitted by Morgiana, a female slave whose intelligence and discretion had long been known to him. "Morgiana," said he, "there's trouble on the back of that ass. Can you keep a secret?" And Morgiana's nod satisfied him better than any oath. "Well," said he, "your master's body lies there, waiting to be pieced, and our business now is to bury him honorably, as though he had died a natural death. Go and tell your mistress that I want to speak to her." Morgiana went in to her mistress, and returning presently, bade Ali Baba enter. Then, leaving him to break to his sister-in-law the news and the sad circumstances of his brother's death, she, with her plan already formed, hastened forth and knocked at the door of the nearest apothecary. As soon as he opened to her, she required of him, in trembling agitation, certain pilules efficacious against grave disorders, declaring in answer to his questions that her master had been taken suddenly ill. With these she returned home, and her plan of concealment having been explained and agreed upon, much to the satisfaction of Ali Baba, she went forth the next morning to the same apothecary, and with tears in her eyes besought him to supply her in haste with a certain drug that is given to sick people only in the last extremity. Meanwhile, the rumor of Kasim's sickness had got abroad. Ali Baba and his wife had been seen coming and going, while Morgiana, by her ceaseless activity, had made the 2 days' pretended illness seem like a fortnight. So when a sound of wailing arose within the house, all the neighbors concluded without further question that Kasim had died a natural and honorable death. But Morgiana had now a still more difficult task to perform, it being necessary for the obsequies that the body should be made in some way presentable. So at a very early hour the next morning, she went to the shop of a certain merry old cobbler, Baba Mustafa by name, who lived on the other side of the town. Showing him a piece of gold, she inquired whether he were ready to earn it by exercising his craft in implicit obedience to her instructions. And when Baba Mustafa sought to know the terms, "First," said she, "you must come with your eyes bandaged. Secondly, you must sew what I put before you without asking questions. And thirdly, when you return, you must tell nobody." Mustafa, who had a lively curiosity into other folks' affairs, boggled for a time at the bandaging, and doubted much of his ability to refrain from question. But having on these considerations secured the doubling of his fee, he promised secrecy readily enough, and taking his cobbler's tackle in hand, submitted himself to Morgiana's guidance and set forth. This way and that she led him blindfold, till she had brought him to the house of her deceased master. Then, uncovering his eyes in the presence of the dismembered corpse, she bade him get out thread and wax, and join the pieces together. Baba Mustafa plied his task according to the compact, asking no question. When he had done, Morgiana again bandaged his eyes and led him home, and giving him a third piece of gold, the more to satisfy him, she bade him good day and departed. So in seemliness and without scandal of any kind were the obsequies of the murdered Cassim performed, and when all was ended, seeing that his widow was desolate and his house in need of a protector, Ali Baba, with brotherly piety, took both the one and the other into his care, marrying his sister-in-law according to Muslim rule, and removing with all his goods and newly acquired treasure to the house which had been his brother's. And having also acquired the shop where Cassim had done business, he put into it his own son, who had already served an apprenticeship to the trade. So, with Ali Baba's fortune well established, let us now leave Ali Baba and return to the robbers' cave. Thither at the appointed time came the 40 robbers, bearing in hand fresh booty, and great was their consternation to discover that not only had the body of Cassim been removed, but a good many sacks of gold as well. It was no wonder that this should trouble them, for so long as anyone could command secret access, the cave was useless as a depository for their wealth. The question was, what could they do to put an end to their present insecurity? After a long debate, it was agreed that one of their number should go into the town disguised as a traveler, and there, mixing with the common people, learn from their report whether there had been recently any case in their midst of sudden prosperity or sudden death. If such a thing could be discovered, then they made sure of tracking the evil to its source and imposing a remedy. Although the penalty for failure was death, one of the robbers at once boldly offered himself for the venture, and having transformed himself by disguise and received the wise counsels and commendations of his fellows, he set out for the town. Arriving at dawn, he began to walk up and down the streets and watch the early stirring of the inhabitants. So, before long, he drew up at the door of Baba Mustapha, who, though old, was already seated at work upon his cobbler's bench. The robber accosted him. "I wonder," said he, "to see a man of your age at work so early. Does not so dull a light strain your eyes?" "Not so much as you might think," answered Baba Mustapha. "Why, it was but the other day that at this same hour I saw well enough to stitch up a dead body in a place where it was certainly no lighter." "Stitch up a dead body!" cried the robber in pretended amazement, concealing his joy at this sudden intelligence. "Surely you mean in its winding sheet, for how else can a dead body be stitched?" No, said Mustapha. "What I say, I mean, but as it is a secret, I can tell you no more." The robber drew out a piece of gold. "Come," said he, "tell me nothing you do not care to, only show me the house where lay the body that you stitched." Baba Mustapha eyed the gold longingly. "Would that I could," he replied, "but alas, I went to it blindfold." "Well," said the robber, "I have heard that a blind man remembers his road. Perhaps, though seeing you might lose it, blindfold you might find it again." Tempted by the offer of a second piece of gold, Baba Mustapha was soon persuaded to make the attempt. "It was here that I started," said he, showing the spot, "and I turned as you see me now." The robber then put a bandage over his eyes and walked beside him through the streets, partly guiding and partly being led, till of his own accord Baba Mustapha stopped. "It was here," said he. "The door by which I went in should now lie to the right." And he had in fact come exactly opposite to the house which had once been Cassim's, where Ali Baba now dwelt. The robber, having marked the door with a piece of chalk which he had provided for the purpose, removed the bandage from Mustapha's eyes, and leaving him to his own devices, returned with all possible speed to the cave where his comrades were awaiting him. Soon after the robber and cobbler had parted, Morgiana happened to go out upon an errand, and as she returned, she noticed the mark upon the door. "This," she thought, "is not as it should be. Either some trick is intended, or there is evil brewing for my master's house." Taking a piece of chalk, she put a similar mark upon the 5 or 6 doors lying to right and left, and having done this, she went home with her mind satisfied, saying nothing. In the meantime, the robbers had learned from their companion the success of his venture. Greatly elated at the thought of the vengeance so soon to be theirs, they formed a plan for entering the city in a manner that should arouse no suspicion among the inhabitants. Passing in by 2s and 3s, and by different routes, they came together to the marketplace at an appointed time, while the captain and the robber who had acted as spy made their way alone to the street in which the marked door was to be found. Presently, just as they had expected, they perceived a door with the mark on it. "That is it!" cried the robber. But as they continued walking so as to avoid suspicion, they came upon another and another, till, before they were done, they had passed 6 in succession. So alike were the marks that the spy, though he swore he had made but one, could not tell which it was. Seeing that the design had failed, the captain returned to the marketplace, and having passed the word for his troop to go back in the same way they had come, he himself set the example of retreat. When they were all reassembled in the forest, the captain explained how the matter had fallen, and the spy, acquiescing in his own condemnation, kneeled down and received the stroke of the executioner. But as it was still necessary for the safety of all that so great a trespass and theft should not pass unavenged, another of the band, undeterred by the fate of his comrade, volunteered upon the same conditions to prosecute the quest wherein the other had failed. Coming by the same means to the house of Ali Baba, he set upon the door, at a spot not likely to be noticed, a mark in red chalk, to distinguish it clearly from those which were already marked in white. But even this precaution failed of its end. Morgiana, whose eye nothing could escape, noticed the red mark at the first time of passing, and dealt with it just as she had done with the previous one. So when the robbers came, hoping this time to light upon the door without fail, they found not 1, but 6, all similarly marked in red. "Clever Morgiana!" exclaimed the Sultan. "The thieves will never find Ali Baba, though they search for 100 years." "The thieves on their own may not," cautioned Scheherazade. "But what of their captain? He has led his band for many years, and will not long be outwitted by chalk marks." "What does he do?" "That," answered Scheherazade, "is a tale of its own. I will tell it to you, if you let me live for one more night."